Wait, but I'm not doing the podcast. You're doing the podcast. This is cursed.
Hello, I'm Ava Hoffman.
No, you're not Ava Hoffman. I'm Ava Hoffman. I believe. Don't gaslight me.
You can use whatever name you want to. We can go with Ava Hoffman though, if that's easiest.
I think that's easiest.
Great. Hello, everyone. I am not Ava Hoffman. I am Beva Bell Harvey, aka Rabbit Squirrel, editor and producer of Outside the Lines, a line writer podcast where usually Ava interviews line writer creators and talks to them about the artistry behind their tracks. But today, I am going to be interviewing her.
What?
Ava Hoffman is a published writer and poet whose work pushes into the visual, the multimodal, and the interactive, who began releasing line writer tracks in early 2021 after being inspired by Visible's Freaks. Deeply informed by her background in poetry, Ava's line writer work has had an enormous impact on the line writer creative community in this relatively short period of time, with an approach that often centers language, social commentary, personal experience, and the conceptual over polish, technical execution, or craft. Ava is constantly challenging the line writer world to break new creative ground, reimagining what themes and narratives it is possible to tackle within line writer as an art medium, and what, if any, skill set is actually required to do so. Today I am thrilled to be interviewing Ava about the September Trilogy, a series of 3 line writer tracks, My Pal Foot Foot, Know Thyself, and On a Day Like This One, released over the course of 2022, that tell the story of September's journey from childhood to adulthood through abuse, trauma, transition, and healing. It is a harrowing but ultimately hopeful piece that shatters long-standing line writer conventions around art, movement, and storytelling. A work that is as deeply moving as it is unique. If you haven't seen it yet, I would highly recommend you go watch it, though not before you prepare yourself to feel some heavy emotions. Welcome to your own podcast, Ava.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
You can probably guess what the first question is. In your own words, describe the September Trilogy. What is it?
Yeah, so the September Trilogy is sort of a series of 3 tracks that I made over the course of sort of 9 months in 2022 that end up sort of each being part of an interlocking narrative. The narrative of one person who's sort of the main character, September, who we sort of see in each track at a different stage of life. The 3 tracks are My Pal Foot Foot, Know Thyself, and On a Day Like This One, and they sort of correspond to childhood, teenagerhood, and young adulthood, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
They were sort of a wild accident that festered in my brain for a long time. It really started with My Pal Foot Foot. I was listening to Outsider Music. An old name for the series before I'd settled on the September Trilogy was Outsiders. I was listening to the Shags, who made the song My Pal Foot Foot. And I realized it had like a narrative that I thought would be like a really good line writer narrative. It's like you're looking for your cat, you wander around the neighborhood, and then you find your cat, right? And I was like, okay, yeah, I can make this. And, you know, it can be like intentionally look really shitty because the song is sort of accidentally shitty, but shitty in an interesting way. But then, you know, as I did more research on the Shags and I sort of started drawing the narrative, it became this very personal narrative about growing up in abuse. And around that time, I'd had a very difficult conversation with my mother.
Uh-huh.
And that ended up sort of coming through in that work. And if you've seen My Pal Foot Foot, you know, it sort of ends in a very devastating way, sort of depressing way.
Yeah, it's brutal.
And I'd been thinking a lot, like the ending was, it had to be that way for the track, but I was really sort of unhappy that that was the ending for that character. And so I then got it in my head. Maybe I could do a couple other tracks with this sort of character I ended up drawing looking for this cat and give them what they need from life instead of leaving her bereft. And that's sort of how it started. And the other 2 tracks are sort of I mean, Know Thyself is even worse because, it's like a whole narrative arc. But then when you sort of push through and out of a cycle of abuse, right? That's generally like the lowest point a lot of the time.
Yeah. It gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah. And so then, and on a day like this one, I'm able to like make a line writer track about healing because I've done all this work in these other 2 tracks. And each one, it was like I thought about it for like a month, and then it was like a haze in my mind over like the course of 2 weeks, and it was made. Yeah, I guess that's sort of the disorganized gist of what the September Trilogy is. These 3 interconnected tracks about the life of a person.
Yeah. So, as I know you're aware, historically, the vast majority of Line Rider scenery was created with a mouse and usually the straight line tool with lines drawn one at a time. And in your Line Rider work, you seem more drawn to using a tablet and using the pencil tool to make these scribbles. And a lot of your work has this very distinctive, sketchy quality. Like I think about Bells as an early example of this, where you were sort of figuring out what you wanted to do with Line Rider. And in the September Trilogy, you really lean into this and you use it as a way to create this really striking style. I would call it expressionistic. So the question is, what drew you to this sketchy, tablet-based, scribbly approach?
So I have talked about this before in like my video essay about Freaks by Visible. I think right at the very beginning, I was sort of drawn to line writer work that sort of leaned more towards a less perfectionistic style. There is this history of the best line writer art is like the most pristine line writer art, right?
Yeah.
Was a tendency for a long time. And I'd paid attention to line writer for a while before I got into it. And the fact that everything was so perfect actually sort of put me off of it. I was like, well, I don't think I can do something like that. Right?
Yeah.
I think part of it is, I think a lot of art is born from one's own limitations.
Mm-hmm.
A pretty big limitation I have is that I'm not a very neat person. I'm kind of messy and chaotic, and pristine stuff even sort of is like unnerving to me because it's like outside of my conscious capacity, right? And so when I saw Freaks by Visible, that was my first pathway in to being like, okay, maybe I can make a narrative in line writer. Because the other thing that's important about Freaks is that Freaks is very the art can be sort of meh, even though the art is actually really great in my opinion. But the art can be like messy because there's like a narrative emotional reason for the messiness, which is this sort of schoolyard context.
Yeah.
Which really elevates what that track is doing narratively and artistically. And it made me realize like, oh, well, maybe I can do something like that, where I'm like telling a narrative and it doesn't have to be like perfect movement, perfect visuals, because it's sort of about an emotional space instead of a realist, or like instead of a realist scene or like a choreographed dance, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of a narrative, right? Which I'm better at because I'm a writer, right? And I was like, oh, okay. This is maybe my pathway in to this, because I was drawn to line writer. I just never thought I could do anything in it that would be interesting. But this is then to just say the scribbly style was sort of, in general, as sort of my general style in my tracks, was sort of an intentional choice that was also sort of born out of knowing that I wasn't going to be good when I started out at line writer, right? I was going to be really crafty at it, but if I was crafty at it in a good way, right?
Yeah. How can you use the crappiness to make something cool?
Yeah. Like, if you think about it, right? Actually, if you keep working in a medium, the shortest period of time in your life working on that medium is the period of time when you suck at it, right? And so it's actually a great opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, this is the only period of time in which you can make something that takes advantage of the fact that you suck, right?
Yeah. It's true. I can't do that anymore. It's impossible.
Right, and it's getting harder for me too.
Mm-hmm.
I figured out movement, and it's like, it's hard to not think about it. You know, it's hard to be like, that's good enough.
Yeah.
As I get sort of better at things and at drawing even too. It's interesting because using the drawing tablet was sort of a happy accident. I already had a drawing tablet because my poetry has a lot of sort of visual elements, and I was trying to like expand what kind of visual elements I could put into my poetry. So I was like, okay, well, I need like a drawing tablet. And so I'd gotten a drawing tablet like that year, right? Or like, I think it was that Christmas before I started
Oh, wow.
working on Line Writer. I'd finally gotten a drawing tablet.
That would have been like, what, 2-3 months?
It would have been 2-3 months. And it was like, well, drawing tablet works. I can use a drawing tablet on .com. I guess I'll do that, right?
Yeah.
Because I definitely, using the trackpad would be way worse.
As someone who didn't have a tablet until mid-2021, it is so much worse.
Yeah.
Trying to make it look like Scribbles when it's not. Terrible.
Yeah. And I know there are some sociopaths who actually do use their trackpad to make things, like Jade. Like the scribbles in Mount Erie were made with a fucking trackpad. Okay. I could not do that. And because I was a writer and I doodle, and it meant it was much more immediately accessible to me to use a drawing tablet, right? And actually, you know, I would highly recommend anyone in Line Writer to get a drawing tablet, honestly. I think it's a great asset.
Yeah.
That's sort of underutilized, because the thing is, drawing tablets are also like, I think they have a reputation of, there's this weird, expensive, exclusive piece of hardware. You can get like a shitty Wacom for like $50 or less, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, it's not like a professional, you know, you're not like a graphic designer or whatever, right? It's not that level, but it doesn't need to be.
For Line Writer.
For Line Writer, especially not, right?
Yeah.
So I'd really recommend it to people because it really opens up a lot of things that you can do, because it sort of lets you have that more sort of immediate pen and paper experience with Line Writer, which I think is very helpful. And so I just kept leaning into that, right? Because it was like, yeah, I can do this, and it serves my artistic and narrative goals with Line Writer. And I started, you know, exploring that more and more in like My Boy, the narrative in that. It's basically stealing from Freaks, that it's also the doodle notebook of a teenage kid.
Except make it gay, right?
Except make it gay, right? It's Freaks but gay. So I was already thinking about all of these things when I started working on My Pal Foot. So like I sort of mentioned, right, sort of this one starting point for My Pal Foot was like, well, it's a crafty song. I mean, I think it's actually a really good song. I like that song. But it's like, it's not a traditionally beautiful song, right? It's sort of jarring and dissonant and arrhythmic in a really wonderful way. And that already sort of aligns very well with sort of my aesthetic goals in Line Writer, which is to sort of take things that are not considered beautiful in Line Writer and to make them beautiful, to sort of invert beauty hierarchies. But and so I was like, yeah, this will fit great with my style. And I'd increasingly been sort of drawing more and more in the Line Writer tracks. It sort of went from doodles that were like sort of isolated thingamabobs, like, oh, here's like a skull sitting here for whatever reason. Like the track before My Pal Foot was, what was the fucking track?
Friends in Low Places.
Friends in Low Places, which has a lot of sort of scribbly drawing and sort of a weird horror theme. And so I had gotten sort of way more comfortable with sort of drawing scenes and narratives. And one thing in Friends in Low Places that I'm realizing right this instant is sort of a important precursor, right, is that it's not executed very well in Friends in Low Places, but there's a sort of moment with this puppet that sort of appears, and like it's supposed to like be playing some music and then says goodbye. But it's sort of done in like a comic book format in the sense that it's like it stops on sort of each movement it does.
Yeah.
The approach to characters before this point had been animation mostly, right?
Yeah.
It'd been like, here's a character who appears, and Bosch is moving very fast, and so the character is just sitting there and is animated, but Bosch isn't doing any movement either, so it is very static, right?
Yeah, Bosch is moving so fast that the whole screen is being animated.
Right.
And then Bosch is kind of just suspended in stasis.
But at this point, I'd already been having sort of a lot of conversations about how Line Rider is kind of like slow animation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
With things like the visualizers and so on, that Line Rider is really best at like this sort of continuous animation, not this frame by frame animation, right?
Yeah.
And you and I had talked about One-Eyed Giant as well, right?
Uh-huh.
And how One-Eyed Giant does a thing similar to what that puppet is doing in Friends in Low Places, and what the entirety of the September trilogy is built on.
Mm-hmm.
It's this idea where, like, if Line Rider is sort of this continuous animation, that doesn't just mean you can do these sorts of visualizer things. It means you can do this thing where it's a comic, almost. It's One-Eyed Giant, right? Bosch is sort of moving by this character in time, right? And you get each sort of frame of this character, and your brain is just like, oh, okay, this is time, even though it's also space, right?
I literally have a question here that is all about this. Why do you think that there is like this gulf between One-Eyed Giant and the September trilogy? Because there's really very little of that comic book style animation of like drawing a character and then animating the character, quote unquote, in a way that's like the comic book style, where as you travel across, the way your eyes would travel across a comic book page, you see still frames of the character doing different things. That happened in One-Eyed Giant, and then like no one did it. Even though everyone loves One-Eyed Giant, it's a classic. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on why there was this One-Eyed Giant and then nothing for 15 years.
I mean, I think there's a few things that sort of contributed to the motion comic thing being One-Eyed Giant and then nothing. I think, first of all, it sort of requires you to link space and time in your head in a way that I think is maybe not immediately intuitive, because it can feel contradictory when you're sort of drawing a track and you're drawing the character like 3 times. It's like, well, this scene doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
And I think there was a very strong tendency early on for an idea of Line Rider that was like, it's this scene. It's this static place. It's this environment that Bosch is moving through.
It's this one large structure or world, and Bosch is just traveling through it, and it doesn't change over time as the video moves forward.
Right, exactly. It's this sort of static idea of what scenery in Line Rider is, right? And even though people love One-Eyed Giant, I think people were sort of not prepared. Like, I mean, it's sort of a similar thing. Is like, why didn't anyone like come up with the thing Invisible's Freaks, right?
Yeah.
It takes an odd leap. Because, I mean, it wasn't even immediately apparent to me until I watched Freaks that you could like stop imagining Line Rider as a space that Bosch is moving through and start imagining it as a piece of paper that Bosch is on. Maybe that's obvious in retrospect, but I don't think it is obvious, because I think when you see the sledder, you're not thinking motion comic. You're thinking, let's make the little dude go down a hill, right?
Uh-huh.
It's very weird, actually, psychologically, to make the leap to, what if we were going down the hill of time?
Uh-huh.
Very unhinged energy. And I think also, right, I suspect there also might be like a technical level to it. It's very line intensive, the motion comic thing. At least the way I do it, but everything I do is overly line intensive. I'm holding up my drawing tablet pen, right? Like, this is the key to it. And this is maybe circling back to the scribbly-dibbly part of it, right? I think when you're holding a tablet pen, you're more immediately in sort of like, oh yeah, I could like draw a little character doing a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
This idea didn't completely not exist for those 15 years, right? It just didn't exist very well, right?
Uh-huh.
It's like One-Eyed Giant was very good, right? But if you see like little kids, Line Rider tracks, like there's that recent one, which is like the Great Line Rider Race.
Uh-huh.
And it is doing the motion comics thing. It's just really bad.
Yeah.
You know? It's not a coherent narrative. It's just like a little kid going like, oh, and then these cars are flying over here, and then there's a UFO, and it's blowing up some stuff, and people are running away, and oh no, and Bosch got to the end of the race. Wah! You know?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and that's great. I love that, right? But I think the people who sat down and was like, I'm going to make serious line rider art, which is very funny that people sat down in general, right? From Quirkers to you to me. It's very funny each time someone does this. I think they want to reject the little kid, right?
Yeah.
Because they want to be serious. That's maybe another element, right? And then also, if you want to draw a really good character, it's just it's a pain. It's a pain in Line Rider.
Yeah.
And that's why the drawing tablet is such a good pathway in.
Mm-hmm.
And with my style, I'm drawing with marks that are made by my hand, right? I mean, they're also made by my hand when I'm doing like a trackpad or doing my mouse, right? It's like I'm using a pen stroke when I'm drawing with the drawing tablet, which I think is a key thing. You mentioned expressionism in the question. And like, what was abstract expressionism, right? It was all about the idea of recording the actual physical marks that the painter was making. Jackson Pollock is like the over-typified example of this, right? Jackson Pollock is like flinging paint at a canvas.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of what you can do with scribbling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's sort of the Freaks thing where you're watching a track that has a narrative, but because you can see my human marks, there's another layer to it, which I think is very important to the September trilogy and all of my work, really, is that what I do with my lines can then mean it's actually saying something about my psychological state and my emotions and me as a person, right?
Yeah.
It's actually very multi-layered, right? You get the emotion from Bosch's movement, the emotion from the art, and you get the emotion from the awareness that someone made the art, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is less immediate when you're using like the straight line tool, right? Because it kind of feels like a computer made this art. Even though that's not true, but
the artist is more invisible.
Right.
It's supposed to be, this thing exists, so how does it exist? Whereas in Know Thyself, you can see how it exists. You look at it and there's like I think about the end with that box, and there's just scribbles everywhere, and they're so dynamic and obviously drawn by a human hand that you almost get a sense of like what you were feeling thinking about it and drawing it at the moment you were drawing.
Exactly, right? And that's what's really great about the scribble is that it is doing all of these things when you use it in a thoughtful, artistic way. A scribble, right? It's like this piece of art that's emotional, like a scribbly thing, but it also has this narrative information where it's like, you can tell September is feeling a certain way in the narrative when certain scribbles appear, right? Like also in Know Thyself, there's this big idiot in red, right?
Right.
Which is like clearly September's internal emotions because it's so much bigger than her body and it's so scribbled, right? You get the emotion of it. But then you might feel like, oh, Ava's communicating something about some of her emotions of negative internal thoughts, right?
Yeah.
This is what I like about the scribbles. And I like this in general in art where I can see that someone has made it because it really lets us practice this really multifaceted empathy that I just love to do.
Yeah.
I really don't understand art that tries to make the person who made it invisible. It's like, isn't art like about you and I? I don't know. And this is not to judge like extremely perfect art. I mean, I admire it a lot because I can't do it, admittedly, right?
I mean, I feel the same way about your stuff. Like, how do you just like take your feeling and just put it on the page? I'm like, yeah.
It's hard in its own way.
Yeah.
You know, your hand gets tired. But I want my tracks to not be viewed as like a corporate product, right? Which I feel like a lot of very perfect art. That's why a lot of standards for like what good art is oftentimes just like what a good product is, right?
Yeah.
I'm not really interested in making a good product. I'm interested in making a good piece of art. I guess that's how I'd put it. And although there's plenty of great art that is also sort of very clean, it's just, for me, I feel like the emphasis on something that makes the labor of the artist invisible, something that emphasizes that, is representative of a culture that makes labor invisible in general. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I'll put it.
I'm feeling called out in
No,
a good way.
no, it's not a call out. It's important in a lot of ways. It's just the fact that that's considered the only or the best thing, right?
Yeah.
Is the issue.
Uh-huh.
Because there can also be something very beautiful and actually personal about making yourself invisible in the art.
I think you're right. I think like a lot of my work, for example, is like I'm making myself invisible. And in the process of doing that, there's almost a like, people don't know how I made it.
Mm.
It makes it into more of a product where it's like something that just exists. And you're like, where did this come from? And the labor is like, what labor? This is just a miracle, right?
It's just a miracle. Yeah, it's just a miracle.
You can't watch an Ava Hoffman track and think, wow, where did this come from?
Yo,
you know exactly who made this and why, right?
Right. What I'm really loving is that we're getting a lot more of that in Line Rider now. Like this past month in October, right? There were like a ton of tracks that were like, they were so personal, right? And you couldn't like forget that it was a person personally made this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad that that's happening. This is all just to say, scribbles.
Scribbles. I think something that ties into this really well, actually, is your work outside of Line Rider. You mentioned that you're a writer. I said earlier that you're a poet. I believe you've described your work on occasion as visual poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Two examples of this that I really like to think about are A Woman Wandered into a Thicket, which is this ginormous image that you have to be able to zoom in to even read.
Yes.
And The Woman Factory, which you have to type in these captchas to read the poem. Your work in Line Rider seems like it's coming at similar ideas about the medium the art is being created in, but from the opposite angle, where you're taking this very visual medium and you're like making poetry with it. As you know, words are difficult and therefore uncommon in Line Rider because it's very line heavy. It's easy for them to fly by and not be able to read them. And yet it's like omnipresent in all of your work. And that puts you at this very exciting forefront of Line Rider as a literary medium, which was something that if you had asked me if that was possible in 2018, I would have, Line Rider as a literary medium would have not made sense to me at all. In the September trilogy specifically, words are like, they're threaded all throughout in all these different ways. Sometimes they're lyrics, sometimes they're dialogue, sometimes they're an internal monologue, sometimes they're poetry, and usually they're like multiple of these things simultaneously layered on top of each other. And very often they're like an important part of how the narrative is moving forward in that moment. So how are you thinking about Line Rider as a medium for the written word? And also, how does your poetry work inform this unique approach to Line Rider in all of your work and also in the September trilogy?
So, yeah, I would consider my quote-unquote main medium to be writing, poetry. I feel like with everything that I do, I'm accidentally converging upon comics as the ideal art form. Because, my poetry, right, has introduced a lot of like pictures and diagrams and sort of sequential, non-linear reading into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like weird abstract comics. And then with Line Rider, right, it was sort of this more drawing medium, and I'm adding like words and like comic sequences.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, yeah, I think the way you put it, right, is like, it feels like they're both converging to comics.
Yeah. Video comics.
Video comics, exactly.
The ultimate art form.
The ultimate art form, video comics. You may not like it, but this is what peak artistic performance looks like. So, yeah, I think poetry really was an important starting point for the addition of words in my line writer art, because lyrics are like so important to me in music, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's tons of great music without lyrics, but I'm never really driven to make a line writer track to something that has no lyrics. And that's because, I don't know, I mean, words are so important to me. Language is so important to me. So it meant I really wanted to put the lyrics in my line writer tracks. So that already necessitates a nightmare, as you sort of highlighted, right? Putting words in a line writer track all throughout the line writer track is so difficult. It's so difficult, right? Especially when you're hand drawing them.
Mm-hmm.
I will say it would be impossible without the tablet. So that's the other, again, we're returning to the scribbleness, right? It's so much easier to like write a word out on your tablet than it is on like a trackpad.
Yeah.
And so, again, the actual tools are lowering a certain barrier to entry here. But at the same time, right, I was really thinking about how lyrics themselves could be scenery, even very early on, right? Like that's what Bells is, right? Bells is this big experiment in typographic scenery, where the words are so scribbled that you can't read them, first of all. But also, in that, there's like a fidelity to the music, which is, in Bells, the actual vocals are so fucking blown out that you can't understand what the person's saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I keep sort of exploring that in like You Want It, where I like tried to make every single word like a disgusting bubble letter that was like half organic, half murderous.
That's the two genders, organic and murderous.
Yes, those are the two genders. Wow. Gender ideology owned. But yeah, and you see that sort of continuing in a lot of ways throughout my work in Line Writer with like quirkier, a lot of words are showing up again. Actually, quirkier is a really good entry into this in terms of the September trilogy, right? Because quirkier itself is a comic in a way, right? It's all these panels that are labeled and you get a very, very abstract narrative from it.
Yeah.
And I guess sort of the flip side to like the comics thing is like you can put words into images, but you can also make images words, right? The September trilogy has a ton of words in it. That's very true. Like dialogue is so key with things people say inside themselves, words that just sort of exist in the environment as lyrics or other things. But I also kind of, this is maybe indicative of how broken my brain is, but like I feel like the characters, the drawings, where I repeat them and where I put them are themselves words also. In fact, a character has all the same problems that a word does. You can go by too fast and are not legible, right? They're super difficult to write, to draw, right? And maybe we might think there's no real distinction between those things, writing and drawing, especially in Line Writer. And if you arrange the drawings in the right way, you get sort of a sentence in terms of this happened, and then this happened. There's like the house imagery in all of those tracks. They're like houses with doors in weird places and windows in weird places, right? That continues throughout. And that is like me sort of taking this image of the house and sort of permutating it through a bunch of like poetic transformations to get at what is the role of home in experiences of abuse and healing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the home is so fraught conceptually.
Yeah.
And emotionally for all of us. At least for me, I don't know. Maybe some people are like, I have no fraught feelings about the concept of a home. But for me, at least, I think for a lot of people who have dealt with abuse from family members, home is a complicated concept. And sort of permutating that was sort of a poetic and narrative and symbolic way of thinking about it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I guess for me, it's sort of this continual flow between words and images is so important to the way I think and the way I write or draw. And the hope is that they sort of build each other up and maybe touch at something true and psychological and heartfelt, I guess.
I think you're onto something. I was thinking about how we use the same word, character, to refer to a letter and a figure.
Mm-hmm.
They're both characters, and you're talking about stringing together one type of character to create sentences and a different type of character to create sentences at the same time. Like, you might arrange letters to make a word, and you might arrange figures to make a comic, and it seems like you're kind of coming at them from the same, like you're thinking about them in similar ways.
Right. The distinction between them is kind of entirely illusory and cultural, actually, right? Like, if you look at the origin of writing, it's really just like people like draw on a thing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, a classic example is like hieroglyphics, right?
Mm-hmm.
A drawing of a bird could mean either literally that word or like a phoneme. And we see that also in like Nahua writing. It's actually very cool because it's just drawings. It's just a comic that there was sort of a way to read it and to get certain key pieces of information, but it was just drawn, right? And that the distinction that we put between this is writing and this is drawing is a distinctly modern and European formulation that is bound up in other ideas about who gets access to the production of art and knowledge.
Yeah, go off.
They really are the same thing, and the fact that we think of them differently is symptomatic of a society that tries to actually hide art making away from people.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you, like, get a little kid, and they're a little kid that likes to, like, put marks on paper, which they don't necessarily have to be, but if you get a lot of those, that's all they're doing. All they're doing is drawing comics. And so I think, like, both my line writer and my writing are sort of getting at that. Maybe this is just a sign I should abandon both and become a comics artist. No. I think by troubling those lines, I'm doing the work that I actually want to be doing.
Yeah. So one of the things that you mentioned in that was when you're talking about the house, you talked about how there's like a trauma relationship with the house. And it's not just the house. It seems like most of what the September trilogy is about like trauma around various things,
Yeah.
Parents, music, home, pets, all sorts of things. It's a lot heavier than your average line writer release. And this is sort of a thread throughout your work. Like, I Want to Be Well is similarly like very heavy compared to your average line writer release. So you seem to enjoy, or at least be drawn to, exploring these sort of horrific experiences from the plausibly real things that are sort of taken from maybe a real life experience, like the parental abuse, to, in Know Thyself, this like supernatural metaphorical stuff like the dismemberment of September towards the end. And you're doing this in an art medium that most people associate with like silly slapstick humor and like wasting time in the computer lab in middle school.
Yeah.
Why?
Why? Why is a hard one. I think on one level, this is just sort of the themes I like exploring. Pretty serious emotions, trauma, gender, the potential for beauty in the midst of those things and healing.
Yeah.
And so if I'm making something in Line Rider, that's just going to necessarily be a part of my voice because those are things I'm interested in. And to be like, oh yeah, this thing is for children, so you can't do something for yourself in it. You know, it's kind of very reductive, right? Like, I don't know. You can do whatever you want in art.
Yeah.
As long as you're being ethical and responsible and stuff, right? I don't really give a shit if you're like making scenes of death and gore and macaroni art or something, right?
Right, yeah. That sounds great.
Exactly, right? So I think on one level there's that, right? This is who I am and I'm making art authentic to me here, so it's just authentic to me still, even if it's intense, you know?
Yeah.
On a deeper level, I think also like the best work that I make in Line Rider is actually oftentimes about growing up, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And about being a kid and then not being a kid anymore.
Yeah.
I feel like some of the best things I've done in Line Rider are about that distance, right? And it's sort of using Line Rider as a way to explore that distance.
Yeah.
My Boy is about queer youth, but even more than that, it's sort of about being a queer adult reflecting on queer youth.
Yeah.
Similarly, with sort of 3 Memories of Snow, again, it's really about being an adult reflecting on being a child.
Yeah. 3 Memories of Snow is a really good example of this, how you're using Line Rider to explore childhood and nostalgia and the distance between childhood and adulthood because Line Rider is so associated with childhood.
Right, yeah. Line Rider has this really strong association with childhood. That means also people are maybe more forgiving when something is sort of more scribble. There's the scribbles again, but also when something, if it's about being a child, I think there can be a strain of people who don't think art about childhood or that has childhood as its subject matter is for them now that they're adults, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like presenting it in that way can like short circuit that in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think specifically with the September trilogy, textually or like literally, this series of tracks is like about actually that distance, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, My Pal Foot Foot looks sort of like a Shel Silverstein comic or something, right?
Yeah.
It looks sort of like childhood drawings. And then Know Thyself looks like edgy teen shit doodles.
Yeah.
Right? And then On a Day Like This One looks more like something maybe an adult drew.
Mm-hmm.
Even just like visually, right? It's about growing up. And having Line Rider be the vehicle for a story about growing up, I'm realizing is a huge theme in the stuff that I make. This nostalgia and reflectiveness. That means necessarily there's going to be some darkness there, right? But I think, I don't know, I feel like being a kid is really dark.
It certainly can be.
This is maybe a tried and true trope, but like, I don't know, I feel like people infantilize children.
No, you're right, though. People do.
And obviously, you want to avoid like making a child a mini adult also.
Right.
But people just like, I don't know, they don't fucking respect the autonomy of children all the fucking time.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me so mad. But I don't know, when I was like a little child, you know, I was like afraid of like the universe ending. Like I was like terrified by this concept. I feel like more things should let themselves be about human darkness. More things should just be open to, like, life has a lot of pain in it. And that's kind of interesting and humbling.
Yeah.
I don't know. It is kind of silly that I make all this serious stuff in Line Rider.
Yeah, you find the weirdest, most infantilized, most impractical medium.
Yeah, that's what I do all the
Make the darkest shit you can.
You know, I work in poetry, so it's not too much of a leap. Both are about as obscure.
One thing I really love about the September trilogy is how it is about this darkness, but because it's about this darkness, it ends up being about healing. Ultimately, it's a story of a trans woman who is surviving abuse and discovering herself and healing from all these traumatic childhood experiences and young adult experiences. You've talked a little bit about that when you were talking about how you ended up making it, but it's really striking to me how rare that is, especially in Line Rider. And I think maybe it's because you can't make a piece of art that's just about healing. You have to have the darkness to heal from. If it's just about happiness, then it's sort of about nothing. And so I'm really just curious about what it was like to make a track about healing in Line Rider and what drew you to that and how you managed to pull it off.
Yeah. I kind of mentioned this, right? My Pal Foot ends up being a little bit of a vent track. Even though it's also, I think separately an interesting narrative and considered piece of art. But, there's a lot that is not one-to-one with my own life, but inspired by my experiences with sort of a transphobic family. I think I was only emboldened to actually make a track about trauma and also healing because of UTD's Silhouette, which is sort of one of the first tracks that is really about abuse.
Yeah.
In an interesting way, right? And also interesting that sort of, in order to explore abuse, it moves into animation, another key linkage, right? And UTD tries to do a similar thing in Where a Silhouette Once Walked, trying to sort of explore healing. So I definitely feel like that's a key sort of inspiration. I was seeing other people make tracks about abuse. Ethan Lee also, they're working on a track about their own experiences with family and the fraughtness of that. Other people were, I think, doing the thinking first in some really important ways that I want to highlight. I saw that and I was like, okay, I can take this subject matter and maybe apply my style and sort of what I've been thinking about with motion comics to it, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't that stately and thought out beforehand. I think that was what I was sort of, it's like, oh, I can do this, right?
Yeah.
And again, sort of Ethan Lee shows up here because Ethan Lee wrote these really amazing reviews. Ethan wrote a review of My Pal Foot and then also wrote a review of Amsterdam. All of these reviews where Ethan was thinking about human trauma and emotions and was doing it in this really sort of considered way that got me really thinking about healing, right? How do you depict healing? And made me really want to try it because it was like these open-ended questions that were like really hard and had no good answer. I wanted to not try to definitively answer them, but I wanted to pick away at these questions, right?
Yeah.
And Silhouette is again sort of the model here with sort of that only being possible with multiple tracks, right?
Yeah.
A Silhouette Once Walked basically does the same narrative move as On a Day Like This One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Except I sort of really sat with them or did them in my way. I mean, it took a much longer process for me, was what I mean by sort of sitting on it. Each one took like way longer than I thought it would, right?
Yeah.
After I sort of finished My Pal Foot, I was like, yeah, now I'll just launch into the next one in the series. And then I didn't do that, right? Each of these I had to really it was several months and then it all came pouring out in a very short period of time with Know Thyself and On a Day Like This One. And On a Day Like This One was the hardest one. It was really hard. I started that track 3 or 4 times before I finally did it. And I was trying different things. One time I played around with slow motion because the track sort of feels slow. I was being overly perfectionistic about it. Like I wanted the movement to be really beautiful, I guess.
Yeah.
What happened is that one night at like 5 a.m., I just...
At 5 a.m.
Well, what happened is that like I like woke up.
Oh, yeah?
I had gone to bed really early. It was like a weird situation where I'd napped and then I slept again. And then I woke up at 5 a.m. and I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm fucking doing with my life. I don't want to go back to sleep.
As one does.
And like, because it was like, there was like napping involved. It meant like,
yeah.
you know, you have a nap. It was like, I don't know. It's weird. I had the energy of taking a nap at like 3 a.m.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
And I woke up and I think like someone else on the Line Writer Artist server was also up for some reason.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know. I just like, in like the space of like an hour to 2 hours, I made all of the movement for On a Day Like This One. And like what it was like, I was being really perfectionistic about it, right? And I was like, I need to actually extend myself the same kind of empathy and acceptance that I want to extend to the character.
Yeah.
That the character needs to figure out for themselves, right? And so it was like, I'm just going to do the movement. And the movement is the movement. It exists, and I'll figure it out. It turned out pretty well, the way the movement operates in that track, but I did not have a plan for it.
Yeah.
And actually, a lot of that movement was a real pain to work with.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of it ended up being very nonlinear. Like at the beginning, there's that section that goes back and forth a bunch. There's a bunch of going back and forth in this track, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that meant I had to really get the camera work right and get the drawings just so.
Yeah. That's so funny that you describe it like you fell into it backwards accidentally, because that's like one of the most striking and beautiful pieces about it, is that there's like this swaying back and forth. My Pal Foot is kind of aggressively linear, and then Know Thyself, it's fucking all over the place, right? We're just like crashing all, like it's a mess, and it works well for that. And then there's this swaying back and forth. We go and then we pause. There's like an important image there, and then we go and then we pause, and then we see an important image there. And then maybe the most important pause, you actually cut to like a zoomed out fixed camera landscape. And there's this moment of realization of, I have to set a boundary. It's like a little micro moment where it's like, this is how healing works, is you figure out, oh, this is what's wrong, and this is what I need to do to fix it, to move forward in the healing process. It's so funny that you describe it as almost accidental that this beautiful thing came about.
Yeah, I know. It works great because it also means the swaying back and forth means you sort of are revisiting things over and over, even though the camera work doesn't really have a whole lot of revisiting per se. It's non-linear in a very soothing way. And it's interesting you mentioned that sort of mountain scene with the realization, right, as sort of the moment of healing. I think you're right that moment is really great and important to like what is healing. But I was like so worried about that moment because like no drawing could fit in that movement because it was too back and forth, right?
Yeah.
And then I realized that it looked like mountains. I was like, oh, what if we were looking at like the world? I think there's an element of falling backwards into it, but the way I did the movement actually sort of metaphorizes healing in an important way, in the sense that the movement was defined and I had to learn how to make something beautiful with what I had, which I think that's what growing up is a lot of the time, right? Is that when you're an adult, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I was a child. And all these things happened, and I had no sense of their meaning because I was a fucking child. And now I have to figure it out. I have to take the things about me that are already defined and go forward and change with them and change within them. Yeah. It's a lot like writing poetry. Maybe writing like poetry in a form is like sort of a metaphor for trauma Anyway. Like doing art within limitations, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe that's why it can be so therapeutic and healing, is because of that. You actually have to do what you have to do to heal, which is like forgive yourself, understand, come up with creative solutions. Yeah.
Instead of trying to figure out, oh, I have to like try again until I get it right or I get it perfect.
Right.
You have to accept what you are and where you've been and what you have.
Yeah. And that I have no background in anything clinical, so this is me going off the rails. But it's interesting because, you know, a lot of the ways in which people like get closed up about art, they never work on anything, or they like are like perfectionist about it. Like we see in a lot of line writer, we see all of these sorts of like, it's interesting, right? Because there's this distinct resemblance to like trauma reactions.
Uh-huh.
Not saying art is the end all be all therapeutic thing.
Yeah, of course.
But I feel like they learn from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Healing and the practice of art. Yeah. And this is to say, with like, how was I able to make something that pulled it off? I would say an element of luck.
Isn't it always, though?
Yeah, I mean, that's all art, right? That is anything. I think also just actually extending empathy to oneself, which I think can be really hard.
Yeah.
If you're someone dealing with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And also sitting on something and thinking about it for a long time is always good. But not forever, right? You have to then kick yourself out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And also the amazing work from so many other people. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I think healing is sort of mysterious and spiritual in a lot of ways. And I think art making is similar. So I don't know. How does anything happen? It's a beautiful mystery.
That's poetry. So,
yes.
How do you feel about the September trilogy now that it's out in the world? How do you make sense of it as something that you have made and that is finished?
I mean, I think it's the piece of line writer art that I'm most happy with. If a witch appeared and cursed me to never be able to make anything in line writer again, I'd be like, okay, well, I made the September trilogy.
Right.
So it'd be okay. I feel very lucky that I got to make it.
Yeah.
I think art can sometimes feel like you're possessed and then you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you're possessed by something that helps make you a better person, all you can do is just feel lucky.
Yeah.
And I hope it is helpful to others. I hope other people enjoy it and get something out of it and learn something from it, whether about trauma, about empathy, or just about art.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of weird, right? You know, it's out as 3 separate tracks, and it's also out as a playlist, and it's out as a single video. So it's kind of in a weird state where I think it's kind of a nightmare for anyone to watch the whole thing, because it's in 3 different places. So I don't know how much access people have to it, which I'm a little bummed by. But I think that's sort of the nature of doing something very weird with the like format-wise, kind of weird with the medium, right? Releasing it as 3 different tracks.
And I don't think you could have made it all at once. It would have been impossible.
Yeah, it would have been impossible to make all at once. And I wouldn't want to sit on the 3 tracks because I feel like releasing them to a group of people and like getting feedback and maybe talking about them was part of being able to make the next one.
Yeah.
So there's a way it was sort of also a durational performance art piece if you want to be deranged about it.
All art making is performance art. When you do it with other people.
Yes, true. But, you know, I would say that I'm very happy with it. I think it's my favorite thing that I've made in Line Writer.
Yeah.
I think mostly I'm like, what the fuck? I wish I could be more like the people I imagine sometimes. Cut that last bit out. Don't.
I will cut it if you want me to.
I guess what I mean to say with that is that it's a vision of healing. It's a vision of becoming a better person. And it's like, oh my God, you know? And sometimes you don't. It's not linear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I look at it and I'm like, okay, let's be slightly more linear in terms of healing right now. Or like,
yeah,
not like forcing myself to be a certain way, but being more like, oh yeah, I've modeled for myself a way of thinking about it, about healing. And that is very nice. I hope it's helpful.
I think that's very common in art generally, is making art as a way of like processing where you are at and where you want to be and where you want to go and how you want to get there.
Mm.
It's like once you can chart it,
yeah,
then you can maybe try to do it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I guess it's not as common in terms of something that I do.
Oh, yeah.
I think partially because it is about healing. It's maybe the piece of art that I've made that it feels like the most like I can still learn something from it. Or it has the most to teach me still.
Yeah. 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 Line Rider.
Line Rider. I hardly know her.
You had to get one of those in.
I did. I'm sorry.
It's perfect. It wouldn't have been right if there wasn't at least one I hardly know her. So, you probably know what this question is.
What? Oh no.
What do you hope for from the future, both in terms of Line Rider and in terms of your life and the world?
I don't fucking know. Why do you think I ask everyone else this question in the podcast? Because I want to know what other people have to say. Fuck.
How the turntables.
Turntable? I can't do the scratching noise. Fuck.
Waka waka.
Waka waka. Now I'm Mrs. Pac-Man.
Don't make hand gestures. People can't see those.
Yeah, I did the Pac-Man hand gesture, everyone. Now I'm going to go eat some pills and then kill ghosts.
None of this is usable.
Yeah, it's usable. You need to include it.
I'll include all of it. I don't know. I don't know. I'll decide later.
Okay, I know what I hope for from Line Rider.
Let's start there.
I hope people keep making more wild, personal, experimental stuff.
Mm.
I feel like we've seen a real big uptick in it this year that is leaving me really hopeful for that future.
Yeah.
Like, Gavin's been making some incredible stuff with At the Door, Instant Flare, Slash. Ray has been making some really great personal stuff this year as well. I mean, there's like fucking Mount Erie and all the rest. It's just been a very, I feel like, even if it has not been the best year for like Line Rider as a commercial product, it has been, I think, one of the best years ever for Line Rider as an art form.
Absolutely.
So I hope it just keeps doing that. Right?
Yeah.
I hope people keep making things and keep making new and interesting and challenging things. I hope a lot of new people find Line Rider. That's the one thing that gets me worried about it.
Yeah.
It's like, it's mostly that the people who are in the community are growing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the people have been in the community for a while at this point. I don't know how many new people are making exciting things.
I'm a lot more optimistic than I was, say, a year ago, because I feel like when people are growing in an art medium as a community, even if there's not people always coming in, the influxes tend to happen in waves.
Right.
And as long as we're learning and growing and changing, it means that when the next wave comes, we're ready.
Right. Yeah, and I don't have that perspective, so I think that's really helpful to hear, right? You know, I came in 2021, right? Which, like, it was at the tail end of one of those waves, I think.
Yeah.
And so I'm just sort of like, my experience of new people coming into Line Riders has just been steadily going down, and I'm projecting the data, but I don't have the full... I'm like a climate scientist who only has 3 months of data.
Yeah. Politics.
But it was politics from the moment I said labor.
It was, wasn't it?
But, I hope people just keep exploring their voices further and further, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I hope for Line Writer is, like, as people are getting sort of more experimental and pushing the boundaries, there's a space for more and better tools for Line Writer still. Actually, this is something I want to emphasize.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the worst sayings ever is the bad craftsman blames his tools or whatever.
Uh-huh.
I hate that saying. I think it's the worst one ever, right? Because our tools define entirely the boundaries upon which we can make something.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing I hope for, like more expansive tools for Line Writer.
Yeah.
Other people trying out wild and new kinds of ways of making tracks. Video editing is one kind of tool. A drawing tablet is another kind of tool. I'm like patting my drawing tablet each time I mention it. And there's this really exciting thing with people moving back and forth between LRA and .com. And that's indicative of people using their tools expansively.
Yeah.
In terms of making tracks that need both.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe a way to unify those would be great.
Yeah. Make it so we can use all of the tools at the same time.
Yeah, it would be very nice. So, well, okay, I'll start. No, I'm going to end with myself. I'll talk about the world. I hope the world...
You really don't want to talk about yourself.
Oh, yeah. What do I want for myself? This is one of the hardest questions that ever exist.
You've already talked about it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because you talked about On a Day Like This One and how it was kind of a process of charting, maybe not a path, but like a direction that you want to move in.
Yeah. I do want to heal. That is something I want for myself. I want to be kinder to myself. I want to make more art. I want to write 50 books before I die. It's this weird, insane goal I have. I want to not assume that people hate me for no reason. And I want to always be able to extend useful and helpful amounts of empathy to myself and the world.
Yeah.
There can be unhelpful amounts, but I want to extend kindness. I want to err on the side of too much empathy than too little. And then for the world, I hope it burns and dies.
We could just end it there if you want.
No.
No.
No. Let me rephrase.
It's a very funny joke.
Let me rephrase. I want every billionaire on Earth to burn and die. And for all the trans people to live in gay fucking harmony. Actually, yeah, that's what I want from the future. I want a future where trans people have at least a modicum more liberation than they do now. That's the future I want to live in. Trans liberation now. Trans rights. Fuck you.
Me?
No. The listener.
The listener, whoever they are.
Fuck you specifically, especially if you're cis. What's wrong with you? Go out there and get some cross-sex hormones and stop being cis. That's where I'm ending it. You need to keep
perfect.
that.
That's what September's doing. That's part 4.
Yeah.
It's gonna make all the cis people trans.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Forced transition.
It's the trans agenda. That's the real reason why I'm making art and line writer, is to brainwash the youth with my gender ideology.
Incredible.
I've already done it. I've already transed at least 4 kids in the line writer community. So
it turns out that if you just live as your authentic self, and you exist around people, they all become trans. I don't know how that works.
It's because transgenders are more authentic than cisgenders.
That was under 2 hours.
I know. I was a little disappointed.
You wanted it to be a 4-hour, right here.
Yeah, I did. I feel like I could have answered 50 more questions. God, that was such a bad question. Now give me another one. No.
Wow,
Yeah,
you're just coming for me. Like,
No. It was great. It was good. You're doing
no,
good.
I'm really. I feel like my brain is expanding in this interview. I'll put this at the end. This will be in the outro or something. I don't know, or maybe in the intro. We'll find out.
We'll find out.